BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone had a good weekend. So, this is Zodiac Monday, of course, but the official name of this program is the Zodiac Killer News Report, and today we have a lot of Zodiac Killer news to go through. Now, you guys can examine the information on your own and try to determine the value of some of it, and I really am looking forward to a lot of feedback and comments from you guys in the section down below, because this is an interactive program where it's not only what I think. I will also respond to people in the comments section, as well as people who choose to contact the show via BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. That's my email address, and it's posted in the description box. And there are numerous things that you can find in the description box, including the link for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. The first is that some of you may have noticed that somebody named Raymond Penrod has been going through a lot of the episodes of Black Box Online Radio and posting numerous comments and messages. At first, Ray Penrod was doing this on Facebook in a group called the Zodiac Killer Library, and then he expanded into some other groups, such as the Zodiac Killer Vault, posting a lot about his Zodiac suspect, Richard Ralph Mangan. Now, his birth name was Richard Mangan, and he changed his name to Ralph Mangan at some time between 1969 and 1971, and I did an episode for the Anything Goes Friday segment about Robin Williams, the actor. It's called The Death of Robin Williams, Life and Times, and I was just talking about Robin Williams, and I mentioned that Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting was the first person I ever heard to discuss Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and then Ray Penrod even decided to weigh in on that, giving some comments about his Zodiac suspect, Richard Ralph Mangan, and not only did Tom Voigt of ZodiacKiller.com call him out for being redundant and unclear, but even I had to ask the question, what's the point? Like, where are you going with all this? What are you doing? I mean, you're just spamming all of my episodes trying to say things about your suspect. And what Ray Penrod said in response was that he will not stop until the media has his attention about his Zodiac suspect, Richard Ralph Mangan. And this is something that I do very frequently, and I shouldn't, but I do. I take the bait. So, Ray Penrod has an open invitation to talk to me, share any findings that he wants for Black Box Online Radio, but I mean, I'm going to keep it very specific, only things that will be on the record and available to the public, because I want almost everybody to have their day in court and to have their ability to share something about their Zodiac Killer suspect, because in an unsolved case, there's always a chance. The one exception to this would be, maybe even 2 or 3 exceptions, would be if I think the person is genuinely fraudulent, if I think the person has absolutely zero credibility and that their suspect is too far out and wacky for a discussion. I mean, some things that might seem nearly impossible, or even if the person is just presenting their information in a very disorganized way, because, as somebody once said, to debate someone, you first have to understand them. You have to at least comprehend their narrative, and some people just do something where they're exporting large chunks of language in an incoherent manner, and then they're just acting like everybody else has to pick it apart and try and make sense of their ramblings. So, I mean, Ray Penrod has an open invitation to contact me and discuss things. Maybe it will be worked into a future episode of Black Box Online Radio. Next, I would like to give a shout out to Batman66, who sent me something, and Batman66 has been a very reliable supporter of Black Box Online Radio and also a member of the Black Box Online Radio Premium membership via BuyMeACoffee.com. Yes, you can make donations or contributions to help support the show, but you can also become a premium member the way that he did. And he sent me an authentic Good Times newspaper. The Good Times was the newspaper that was run by Richard Gaikowski, who was one of the most famous Zodiac Killer suspects, and in this one, I mean, firstly, it was just kind of surreal actually holding a copy of the Good Times in my hands. I know that some of you guys who follow this program have already done that, but it's really the first time that I picked up one of Richard Gaikowski's newspapers, and this is not an original observation. This is not my own discovery. Yes, it's been mentioned many times on the internet, but when you look at the intersection of the G and the T in Good Times, he really does look like the Zodiac Killer symbol, and a lot of people think that was an influence for Gaikowski to choose that and go on to become the Zodiac Killer. But there was an article that was written by Richard Gaikowski on one of the early pages talking about a street vendor in San Francisco who was selling sandals, and as you see, this issue of the Good Times was postmarked after the first Zodiac Killer crime should have taken place, and I was like, now, what is going to be the thought process of somebody, hypothetically, if Richard Gaikowski were the Zodiac Killer? Is he going to murder Darlene Ferrin and then go on to have to write some article about a guy selling sandals on the street? I mean, what exactly would be the type of reconciliation in someone's mind? All right, I've created this serial killer persona, and it's quite possible the Zodiac already decided that he wanted to choose the name Zodiac after July 4th of 1969, but it's important to remember that the Zodiac didn't reveal that until about a month later. So when the first phone calls and even the first letter on July 31st were mailed, the name Zodiac was not used. But like, someone has created this serial killer persona, and then they have to go back to their day job writing an article about street vendors selling sandals. I don't know. I mean, definitely doesn't seem to match up with the egoism. And I'm not trying to say that as any type of challenge question, just kind of my own observation. And also, a big thing with serial killers is that they have a return to normalcy, that they live their lives in a normal way, not giving away any signs of being threatening, and they only show their threatening tendencies when they are actually attempting to commit the serial murders that they unfortunately become famous for. But I thank Batman66 for sending me this, and I'm going to go through more of the articles in the Good Times in this particular edition, looking for clues. Now, I've had the opportunity to discuss the Zodiac Killer case with numerous people, and two of them are Thornton Daniel Jeffrey and Melissa Rose Tappa, and you guys will remember them for being the two people. They're a research team that brought forward the suspect Loring Dale Hill, and he was known as Lorin Hill in his life, Lorin, even though his legal name was Loring. Some people called him Lorin Hill. And he was also known as L.D. Hill, Loring Dale Hill. And he is a suspect whom I've only learned about recently, and exclusively through the research and sharing from Melissa Rose Tappa and Thornton Daniel Jeffrey, whom I'll just be calling Jeff and Melissa from now on in this episode. And they have some other discoveries that could have possibly have been made, because one of the strongest pieces of connection to their theory relates to the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card. Not only was the Zodiac Killer a serial killer who operated in 1968 and 69, but the Zodiac is even more famous for the communications that have been connected to him. The letters, the phone calls, the car door at Lake Berryessa, which had a message written on it, and of course the Zodiac Killer ciphers. But the Zodiac didn't only write conventional letters and cryptograms, he also created greeting cards. Maybe the most famous one is the Zodiac Killer Halloween card, but I'm sure you're already listing them off in your mind. The Dripping Pen card, the Dragon card, the Peek Through the Pines card. Numerous different types of communications were created by the Zodiac Killer. And the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card features numerous pieces of artwork. It has multiple skeletons on it, it has eyeballs that are almost free-floating, and it also has this image that has been attributed to a Tim Holt comic that has been called The Wheel of Death, and it says, by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire. And the actual comic features Tim Holt and his Red Mask character, and there's a woman named Lady Doom who is spinning the Wheel of Death, and it can land on by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire. There's also by arrow, by water, like drowning, and there were different aspects of the Wheel of Death, but the 4 that were chosen for the Halloween card are by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire. But there's a particular line that it says, "From your secret pal." And this relates to a new discovery that could have been made by Melissa Rose Tappa, and that involves her suspect, L.D. Hill. Now, L.D. Hill's mother was a writer for the newspaper in North Lewisburg, Ohio, and she wrote an article talking about secret pals, and this is an origin of a secret pal because it's not common language, and this is something that Melissa Rose wanted to share with me. We are all familiar with the term Secret Santa, right? And even if you haven't, I'll just share it for you right now. A Secret Santa is when you draw a name out of a hat and you buy a gift for one person, and each person will exchange one gift amongst the other members of the group. But the term secret pal is not widely used. But you have L.D. Hill's own mother writing an article talking about an exchange amongst secret pals. Then this is just, in the world that he would have grown up in. And furthermore, Melissa and Jeff have launched a website called ZodiacKillerBomb.com, where they are organizing their findings about their Zodiac suspect, L.D. Hill. And also, L.D. Hill was a member of the Navy, a career naval serviceman, first a helicopter pilot and then a naval aviation mechanic, and he wore a patch in the Navy from a squadron that featured a dragon that is very similar to the Zodiac Killer's dragon card. And to hear more about that, I will direct you specifically to ZodiacKillerBomb.com, where Melissa Rose has created a new post. Now, in addition to finding the clue about the secret pals and finding the image of the dragon, there is also something that is very important on the Halloween card. Again, the dragon card is a different one, but on the Halloween card, by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire. And Melissa has made an observation about the Zodiac Killer case that I have never truly heard before from anyone else, and that is the possibility that by fire might be the result of something that was involved with the Zodiac Killer's military service. Now, they believe that Loringdale Hill was the Zodiac Killer, that he was in the Bay Area up to, firstly, let's just go through the timeline. He's in the Bay Area on December 20th of 1968 for the Zodiac Killer's first crime, the Lake Herman Road murders. The murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. On January 7th of 1969, L.D. Hill left California on the USS Enterprise and was stationed overseas. On January 14th of 1969, roughly 1 week later, there was a fire that broke out on the USS Enterprise, and there were 28 servicemen that died in this fire. And then on July 2nd of 1969, L.D. Hill returned to the Bay Area, and of course on July 4th of 1969 there was the Blue Rock Springs shooting, which saw the death of Darlene Ferrin. So they can pinpoint his whereabouts exactly, matching up with the Zodiac timeline, as well as with the timeline of the USS Enterprise. And she believes that the term by fire on the Halloween card is referring to the deaths of the 28 servicemen. They also believe that Loringdale Hill murdered 9 people, and that the Zodiac Killer would go on to claim 37 lives. 9 people plus the 28 who died on the USS Enterprise would total 37. And it goes beyond that because there are so many resources out there about the fire on the USS Enterprise, and I had always said that I wanted to just sit down and watch one of these 40-minute documentaries, put some time aside one day, and do that, and I did just that. And I found one that was called Trial by Fire. Trial by Fire is also the name of a book about the USS Enterprise. There are multiple books that have been written about this event, and as I understand how this would have taken place, is that, and I'm not going to try and go too far into the details because I don't want to misstate something. A vehicle was parked 18 inches away from one of the F-4 bombers on the USS Enterprise, which was an aircraft carrier. And the heat was too intense, and it created an explosion. And then the first thing that happened is the fuel from the jet began to spread across the platform, across the deck of the USS Enterprise, and the flames just began just spreading more and more, and this caused more bombs that are on both these fighter jets to explode. And just some of the details and the stories of the people in Trial by Fire that were just very, very gruesome. One guy was talking about how his goggles melted onto his face, and that his pant legs were just torn up, and he had blood everywhere. But I guess the adrenaline had just taken over because he didn't feel any pain. And I say I guess because he said that he was just shredded, but he didn't feel any pain, even though his goggles had melted to his face, and he had to rip them off just so he could see. But it was all painless, so the only thing I can think of would be adrenaline. And another person had just tried to escape the fire by going below deck, and then someone said, "You're bleeding," and he said, "No, I'm not, I was just helping somebody." They're like, "No, blood is squirting out of your back," because not only would they have the fire, but they would also have shrapnel that is being blown up, and then is just harming multiple servicemen. Now, I don't necessarily know what Melissa and Jeff would think about this, but I think that there is a strong insinuation that their suspect, Loringdale Hill, L.D. Hill, might have been responsible for this fire, and would have been intentional, unintentional. It's really hard to say because the fire was investigated, and in Trial by Fire they said very clearly that it was deemed to have been an accident, no charges were filed. But one thing that Melissa Rose has been able to uncover is that L.D. Hill was one of the people who was investigated as a result of the fire. He was investigated in relation to the fire, and you just have to wonder about the type of thought process that someone would experience if they had been responsible for a fire like that. Because as I was watching the documentary Trial by Fire, I was just thinking, well, who parked that vehicle 18 inches away from the fighter jet? And again, I'm going off of memory on that, so I saw this thing one time. I don't want to misstate something. But who was responsible for the fire? And, like, how would people respond to them? How would they feel about that? Was it even something that was intentional? Did they know that this was going to happen? And I think no matter what, there is some type of connection that has been made in Melissa and Jeff's theory in relation to their suspect L.D. Hill, that he was paying homage or drawing a connection, I should use that phraseology, drawing a connection between the Halloween card and the fire on the USS Enterprise, meaning that 28 servicemen had passed away, and there was this very big connection between the Zodiac Killer's activities and L.D. Hill's military service. The uncertainty of his military service, as well as perhaps the entire creation of the Zodiac Killer persona, could have been attributed to some type of mental break that he had after the fire on the USS Enterprise. Now, very clearly, L.D. Hill, in their theory, would have been a serial killer prior to the fire on the USS Enterprise, as evidenced by the Lake Herman Road murders. But then it would have evolved into something where someone is trying to respond to some type of broken, narcissistic, egotistical pattern, and they create the Zodiac Killer image as a way to get away from this possible accident that they caused, or maybe the fire was even intentional, and that this was the result of a calculated choice. Those details I'm not clear of, and that would require something like psychic powers to know actually what was that person thinking when they set up the chain of events that would have caused the fire on the USS Enterprise. But as I was watching that documentary Trial by Fire, the whole time I was wondering, well, how did this thing start? How did this happen? And ultimately, the conclusion was accidental because of a design flaw. And, as I said, something overheated, which caused the initial explosion, which forced the jet fuel to spread across the deck of the Enterprise. But, the Enterprise was more or less restored to a certain extent, and there's all types of tidbits of military history that had been found there that was actually the 8th ship that was used the name Enterprise in American military history going all the way back to the 1700s. And when I was reading up on the USS Enterprise, it took the longest time before I encountered anything related to Star Trek. I thought the Star Trek things in the Enterprise would come right to the top of the list. No, you had to go through pages and pages of info before you found anything related to Captain Kirk or something like that. And I think that the biggest issues with that are just that Americans are passionate about military history, and the servicemen really want to document this. And the title "Trial by Fire" was also used for publications that were about a fire on the USS Forrestal, and that is just goes to show that there was a very similar fire that took place. Were they related? Probably not, but these events in naval history are very well documented, and we also have media of the fire on the USS Enterprise. And I mean, there was a deck cam that in the documentary footage was all put together. Like the documentary Trial by Fire used the authentic first-hand source, and it was shared in a very respectful storytelling way. But they were using it purely for historical context. So I just encourage Jeff and Melissa to keep going with their suspect LD Hill and to see what they find. I think that they're coming at it from a very different standpoint, and they also have a suspect that seems to be focused more on other things, whereas a lot of people look at the Zodiac and they think that he was a sad, lonely man. But LD Hill was 34 years old at the time of the Zodiac murders. He was married with multiple children. And I just had to ask that because somebody sent me that question. How does that fit into your Zodiac theory? Okay, that this guy would have been a serial killer that targeted couples, a serial killer that would have gone after people in roughly Lover's Lane type situations, and not to mention before and after the fire on the USS Enterprise, January 14th of 1969. That's just smack dab in the middle of the Zodiac Killer's activities from 1968 to 69. Like, how does that all fit into the theory? And the issues could be problems with his wife, problems with his children, and children, yes, because the Lake Herman Road victims were only 16 years old and 17 years old. They were very young, and it could also represent some type of heterosexual animosity toward his wife, toward his family members, as well as mental instability, a hidden dark side that other people wouldn't have been familiar with. But I just will encourage them to keep going, and that's my ultimate take on the suspect Loringdale Hill. I'm not 100% sure where this story will end up, but I want Jeff and Melissa to keep exploring. I want to see how far they can go and what other types of clues they will find. And I do appreciate all of the observations they've made about the Zodiac Killer's connection to the USS Enterprise. And one more time, you can read the full write-up about the connection to the Dragon card at ZodiacKillerBomb.com. Now, through my conversations with Jeff and Melissa, I will bring us to the next segment here on Black Box Online Radio, and it relates to a book that Melissa Rose had told me about that I had never heard of before, called Zodiac Cracked. I mean, that's what I thought the title of it was originally, Zodiac Cracked, but it's actually Zodiac Racked, or Zodiac Cracked, depending on how you would choose to pronounce it. It's written by someone named Marianne Corfer, and I had never heard of this book before, and I decided to get on Amazon.com, and what I do very frequently is I pick up a free sample of the book before I choose to purchase it. I mean, that's the idea, right? But I also wanted to look at what exactly was she going to say about the Zodiac Killer? Again, just jumping right in, no prior knowledge to what she was going to say. And if you do read the free sample, I don't think that it's the most valuable or beneficial, but it's going to reveal one thing. And this book talks about a Zodiac Killer suspect named Warren Earl Estes. And from Google Images, I couldn't find an exact photo of Warren Earl Estes, but he does have a direct connection to Riverside, California, and the 1966 murder of Sherry Jo Bates. And to the credit of Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy and the webmaster of ZodiacRevisited.com, he made a list of the different Zodiac researchers, as well as the places where you can find their material. And one of them was Marianne Corfer. And Marianne Corfer had posted an outline of her theory on the Zodiac Killer back in 2014 on a forum, and I would like to read the post that was written by Marianne Corfer. Again, these are all going to be her words and her observations, and I'm going to try and be as fair as I can to her and her ideas about the Zodiac Killer. She begins by talking about Steve Hodel, another Zodiac researcher. Steve Hodel developed the term thought prints. See stevehodel.com for his very intelligent definition of the term. I was aware of this process as I was immersed in Estes's traits, that's her suspect Warren Earl Estes, as they related to the Zodiac letters and actions. Steve was able to put a most fitting name to the awareness of connecting traits, thought prints, just as the term serial killer was able to clarify and define a type of killer. If you understand thought prints, you will understand the astronomy connections that run throughout the Zodiac letters that I consider a diary of the killer, and they are threaded with astronomy, which Warren Earl Estes was very passionate about, along with his collecting. And yes, ultimately, Warren Earl Estes was an astronomer who lived in Riverside, California for a time. And, this becomes the focus of the connection between the name Zodiac and astronomy. And this is something that has also been discussed by the previously mentioned Michael Cole in his books, that when people hear the term Zodiac, immediately they go for astrology, like talking about the star signs, the sun signs, and the effects of the alignment of the stars on somebody's personality, like you're a Capricorn or you're a Leo or you're a Taurus, and how that affects your personality. I talked a lot about it on my other YouTube channel, AstroPsych 400. Even though I'm not the biggest believer in astrology, that's what the original intention of AstroPsych 400 was, to actually just talk about the different elements of astrology that just might have some value. But what Michael Cole said was people are thinking about astrology with the term zodiac. We have the Western zodiac, or the Chinese zodiac, the Greek zodiac. But why not look at astronomy? And one person who has done that in the past has been Marianne Corfer in her book Zodiac Wrecked. I'll just call it Zodiac Cracked. That's what she intended the title to be. But her words are, my book explains that the many astronomy and collection connections of Warren Earl Estes to the Zodiac. Here are some of the points. Number 1, the Exorcist letter, no cross circle at the bottom, as Warren Earl Estes is no longer active as the Zodiac Killer. He has moved on to movie making. 8 days prior to the mailing of this letter, Warren Earl Estes was working with his astronomy group at a public advertised event from January 7th to January 21st of 1974. The event brought the viewing of the comet Kohoutek, Kohoutek, to the public. He signed off with doodles of telescopes that were on his mind. And again, here, let me stress the letters are a diary of what Warren Earl Estes / the Zodiac Killer were doing and had planned to do. The trigger mechanism that the Zodiac Killer talked about that sets off the bomb in both diagrams is a meridian transit telescope. The clues describe this telescope as to set it to magnetic north, sitting on a square fixed base, setting circles with tick marks. When the sun transits the telescope, its sight, it triggers a signal that sets the time to a sidereal clock. The clock is located at the Chabot Science Center and Observatory on the east side of the bay at Oakland. The bottom of the Mikado letter is clearly signed off with a very large inverted zodiac circle and cross. When you look through the telescope, the image is an inverted C, and it's telling us that that he inverted this with a cross circle. He further gives us the clue of PS. The Mount Diablo code concerns radians and inches along the radians. They're used to determine the focal point of a telescope. The bomb location cipher is very clearly reading Chabot Meridian Transit Telescope. I believe that each of the zodiac ciphers are different types of cryptograms. And I said that I would be as fair as possible when talking about this suspect. I also believe that the Zodiac Killer used different types of cryptograms. There are 4 ciphers that have been attributed to the Zodiac Killer: the Z408, the Z340, the Z13, and the Z32. Now, there could be more, the Fairfield ciphers, for example, but as far as the first 4 that I've listed, they are confirmed. The Z408 and the Z340 have been solved, but the Z32 and the Z13 have not. The Z13 is the My Name Is cipher, and the Z32 is more about the location of a bomb rather than the identity of the Zodiac Killer, although it's entirely possible that he could have just given his name in that cipher as well. It's not like the killer's playing by a rule book. But what about the location of the bomb? Here's another quote from Marianne Corfer. The bomb-making materials that the Zodiac lists that he needs to make the bomb are a mirror, battery, tubes, and even a clock, all telescope-making materials. In the second updated bomb diagram, the Zodiac Killer eliminates the use of the mirror and then uses the sun directly. The bus will pass through the site of the tubes and trigger the bomb. As in the Meridian Transit Telescope, the sun passes through the site of the tube and triggers the time. Warren Earl Estes was noted for making telescopes out of scrap material and made over 200 telescopes. In the letters, the Zodiac calls his bomb creation the masterpiece. Of all telescopes the Zodiac and Warren Earl Estes made, there surely is a masterpiece. I mean, the bomb surely is their masterpiece. That is a very vague and ambiguous statement that, okay, well, I mean, this is something intricate, therefore it is a masterpiece. I don't particularly like that observation. Now here's something I will challenge even more strongly. The Zodiac Killer took Paul Stein's glasses as he was attracted to lenses. That's what it says. It actually says, I'm going to read this verbatim. Z took Stein's glasses as he was attracted to lenses. Z, of course, being the Zodiac Killer, and Paul Stein, of course, being the Zodiac Killer's final victim, who was murdered on October 11th of 1969. The Zodiac Killer took Paul Stein's glasses as he was attracted to lenses. This is one that I will challenge very strongly because throughout doing this show, the Zodiac Killer News Report here on Zodiac Monday, I've encountered quite a few things to the contrary. Number one, Tom Voigt shared a statement from Dave Tosky that stated that Paul Stein's glasses were logged in evidence, and I have to give a shout-out to Andrew Gray, who provided the information that Michael Butterfield claims that he is in the possession of a photo of Paul Stein's body from a different angle that shows that he was still wearing the glasses, and this is the idea that the Zodiac took Paul Stein's glasses, his wallet, his keys, and, of course, anything that would have been in the wallet, and most famously, the bloody shirt. So I think that this is something that just simply shows an inaccurate statement. But even if it's true, let's say all of this, all of these testimonials that people have shared, all of this, these statements that people have made are incorrect, hypothetically. The Zodiac Killer took Paul Stein's glasses because he was attracted to lenses, and that's because he was an astronomer who liked telescopes. You're going to have to do a lot better than that. Could there not be another reason why he would take Paul Stein's glasses? I mean, why does that have to be it? How is there any type of connection there? No precise information, no specific reason. Did the Zodiac say that he took Paul Stein's glasses in a letter because he liked the lenses? Assumption. So, that's my ultimate take on the subject. The Peek Through the Pines card was also mailed by the Zodiac Killer, and Warren Earl Estes made binoculars, finders, and telescopes, and he worked with the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts and the Sierra Club as astronomy club outings. We were always peeking through the pines just as he wanted to do with the hole in the Pines postcard that was outlined like a telescope site. Again, does the Pines card say anything about telescopes? Does the Pines card say, hey, here's a hint, I'm an astronomer? No. So again, you're just making assumptions. Next point, astronomers use black cloth to drape over their heads and eyepiece areas of their telescope to remove as much light as possible from their receiving view. Cloth, like Estes would have had on hand to make the Mikado Lake Berryessa hood with complete telescope sight. The use of the Apollo 8 lunar stamp twice was used for the Zodiac. Warren Earl Estes and his astronomy club were very involved in the Luna occultations during the Apollo years. Well, I'm not even going to pretend that I know what the Luna occultations are, but this idea that the black cloth was used to drape over their heads when they're looking into the telescope, yeah, I've seen those similar things before, and that's not a bad observation. I told you I'm going to be as fair as possible, that the Lake Berryessa hood could have been composed out of a cloth that, was used to drape over someone's head while they're looking through a telescope. I mean, why not? I mean, that would be a solid explanation as to how and why this person would have been in the possession of a similar piece of material, and it could be easily modified into the Lake Berryessa costume. Now, the Mikado Lake Berryessa hood, we are not 100% that the Zodiac Killer's famous hooded costume actually came from the Mikado, or that it's actually paying tribute to the Mikado. A lot of people believe that it's the Lord High Executioner from the Mikado, but I'm not 100% convinced of that. Are you? Could there not be an alternative possibility? Could it not be that the hood just existed in a different way, and that somebody decided to turn it into a mask because they had the very easy ability to do so. The book Zodiac Cracked explains so much more in detail in all of the items above, connecting incidents that create the thought prints of Warren Earl Estes and the Zodiac. And of course, there is so much more to this man's persona than just astronomy. Let's not forget his collecting obsession. Well, thank you so much to Marianne Corfer for writing out all of her statements there. But because I do want to challenge people's ideas on the Zodiac Killer news report and talk about some conflicting perspectives, another thing that had been shared with me by Melissa Rose is that Mike Morford had actually written a book review of this. Mike Morford of ZodiacKiller.net, also known as, previously he was the webmaster of ZodiacKillerSite.com, and I would like to read Mike Morford's book review of Zodiac Cracked. 2 stars. This book is a waste of time, and just proves that anybody can write a book about the Zodiac and claim that they have solved the mystery. Zodiac lived and operated in the San Francisco Bay Area. He stalked the area and attacked victims there in secluded, lonely areas, which showed that he knew the area well. He mailed all of his letters to the press from the area, most of them postmarked on weekdays in San Francisco. All of this demonstrates that the Zodiac, whomever he was based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and likely lived or worked there. Yet despite all of this author, Marianne Corfer, has latched onto a suspect that never lived in San Francisco, but rather in Riverside, California, which was at least 6 hours south. The biggest hole in her theory is that she has latched onto her suspect because of his closeness in proximity to the possible Zodiac murder of Sherry Jo Bates, an early victim. And yes, as previously stated, Warren Earl Estes was an astronomer who lived in Riverside, California. In short, for her to have solved the case, her suspect would have had to have been in all the areas of Zodiac attacks and letters in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he simply wasn't. He was 6 hours south. While I personally believe that the Zodiac may have killed Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside, I think he most certainly mailed letters in the Bates case. I am skeptical of the author's suspect and think that this suspect is simply a terrible one. Well, there's a difference between being skeptical of someone's suspect and thinking that they are a terrible one. Think about the Zodiac Killer suspects that I've talked about in this episode. Richard Gaikowski, Richard Ralph Mangan, L.D. Hill, and now Warren Earl Estes. I am skeptical of all of them. Absolutely. There are reasons to doubt all of them because it's an unsolved case, and I absolutely do not believe that any of the suspects mentioned in this episode do not fit like a glove. Arthur Lee Allen doesn't fit like a glove, and Mike Morford even talked a lot about Ross Sullivan in the past. Ross Sullivan would be too big to fit into a glove. So, there are all types of reasons to doubt someone. But as I said very clearly, like Jeff and Melissa have proposed L.D. Hill as a suspect, I don't think he's a terrible one. I'm skeptical of it, but I don't think he's terrible. Now, Warren Earl Estes, I think that there are a few points for and a lot of points against. And that's perhaps the most polite that I could be about the case. I'm going to go back to Mike Morford's quotation. Again, this author is claiming that she is just the latest author to have solved the Zodiac case. She is not the first, and she will not be the last. To quote a line from one of the Bates case letters, and sadly, I fear, there will be more. There will be more books like this to come. Edit. I had to edit and drop it down to 1 star, as this suspect and scenario presented by the author is just simply unlikely and unbelievable as actually being the Zodiac, and she presents a scenario of, well, he could have flown back and forth between San Francisco and Riverside, as opposed to solid factual links to the suspect. Again, Mike Morford once thought highly of Ross Sullivan, and could he ever be placed more than 77 miles within any of the scenes of Zodiac activity? Maybe yes, maybe no, but I don't know if that's certifiable, and I'm just trying to be fair to Marianne Corfer. Now, somebody challenged me on this once. I think it was actually Albert Forel in the comments section. Albert is one of our many listeners in Sweden, and Albert was just responding to some claims that I had made, because I'm like, now wait a second, when you got some suspect that's going to be living outside of the Bay Area, not only would they have to be there to mail... Okay, I gave away the punchline. Not only would they have to be there to commit the Zodiac murders, they also have to be in the Bay Area to mail the letters and to mail the ciphers. And what he said was, oh, that's impossible, but Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, can go from Montana to Salt Lake City to mail a package. Yes, the Unabomber traveled an enormous amount of distance before he would mail his packages. So I think that it's definitely possible that somebody could take a plane to these locations. Possible, yes. But let's get to the heart of the issue. What Mike Morford is trying to say is those are presented as possibilities as opposed to certifiable facts. And countless zodiologists will do this. Countless zodiac researchers will do this. Well, he could have done this. Well, he could have done that. Or maybe they'll even phrase it in terms of a question. Now, did he get on a plane and fly from Southern California to Northern California? Well, I don't know. Did he? I mean, you're writing the book about how you solved the Zodiac Killer mystery. Why don't you show some certifiable evidence? Why don't you show a photograph of him somewhere on July 4th of 1969 in Northern California? And I would really like to know more about Warren Hurl Estes and his biometrics, his physical features, and anything associated with his physical appearance. I would like to know more about Warren Earl Estes and his height and weight and shoe size. Those things will tie in together, and I'm sure that those answers will be found in Marianne Corfer's book, and perhaps I'll do a follow-up on him in the future. I like her observation about the Lake Berryessa hood, I've said that, but the idea about stealing glasses because he liked lenses, because he was an astronomer, that is an insufficient connection. There's insufficient evidence to make that connection. It's not even mental gymnastics at that point. It's just a borderline incoherent statement. So I'm definitely going to be a little bit easier on her than Mike Morford was, but I'm also going to be tough in certain areas. And the final concluding notes that I have for you are in relation to some pieces of fiction that I have written in the past, and you guys know that I'm the author of the book Killer on a White Horse, A Story of the Evening Watchman, and I'm planning on releasing the updated version of that in the near future that will be done with the new cover art that was created by Shaper Art. Thank you so much for that. And that will be coming out sometime this fall season, maybe even at the end of the summer. And by the end of the year, I'm also hoping to release Down the Dark Lane, my second book, in audio form, which will be just put out here on YouTube for free. I've said before that with the editing process in Down the Dark Lane, it was a manuscript that I had written actually many years ago, back in 2010, and what I had decided to do was to just kind of go through it one more time, and I tried to clean it up and get a lot of the typos out of there, but there are so many that I missed that I think it really is something that I should not be charging any money for on Amazon.com, so I'm mostly just going to move it over to YouTube, and by the end of the year, I'm hoping to release it on YouTube in audio version only. Down the Dark Lane contains 3 short stories, and the third one is a sequel story to Killer on a White Horse, the story of the Evening Watchman, and it will be available in print in the new book. In Killer on a White Horse, the second version, like the second edition, is going to have the original novel, and then there will be the final part 2 concluding story. The second story will be available at the end of the book. So please look out for that in the near future, and I'll keep you guys posted on some of those updates. But other than that, feel free to visit some of the links in the description box. Killer on a White Horse is available on Amazon.com. Of course, there's BuyMeACoffee.com, and anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and there is always BlackBoxNid88 over on Instagram. But most importantly, I want to hear what you guys think. What do you think about the suspects that have been mentioned in this episode? What do you think about L.D. Hill and his military service on the USS Enterprise? Are Melissa, Rose, and Jeff exploring the case in the right direction, or do you think they're way off? What about somebody like Marianne Corfer? Do you think that she has a strong point about the Zodiac Killer being an astronomer, or are her observations way off? That's what I really want to hear from you guys in the comment section down below. And that's all for me now. I'll see you over on Instagram. Goodbye.